That's how I predicted 9/11 in this fictional book that became real. So that I still think could be our biggest threat, because you've got militia groups. Really, the right-wingers scare me more than the Islamic types, because they're here. And if they got most of the advanced weapon and did use it to try to assassinate particular members of Congress or a particular leader, we could be back in martial law. That, I think, is a greater threat than anything from overseas, missing planes, or anything else going on these days. I mean, look at all the death threats Obama's gotten. Way, way more than anything George Bush faced. And I believe a lot of it's racism-based, more than the fact he's a Democrat. Say, one of the part of the deal I did on video, and still on YouTube, I did an interview with a Dr. Ron Hatchett, who was a weapons expert for the Ronald Reagan administration. And I said, talked about this fictional book about a potential attack against us, And I said, is that a feasible thing? He said, oh, yeah. And then he got into talking about how Russia, for example, has not just the large strategic nuclear weapons. You can't carry off an ICBM missile very easily, but these small tactical nuclear weapons, a suitcase bomb, for example, a suitcase nuke. Actually, a nuclear bomb in the size of a suitcase. 100 or a couple of hundred of these things in the Russian inventory, some of which have gone missing. And what would happen if one of these nut groups parked one in a van somewhere near the Capitol and set the thing off? You wouldn't have any Congress people left. You would have to wonder who the hell's in charge. We'd have a lockdown. We'd have economic chaos. This is where, the Osama bin Ladens could be a threat, yes, if they were able to backtrack into Russia, which is next door to Iran, basically, and get something like this and smuggle it in. So that is still a potential threat. But even if they didn't do it, then you've got the wingnuts that we've got who are just about as crazy that, they might think, well, libertarianism, we don't need government, all this stupid stuff. Say you should never just kind of assume that all the risks are gone, that we're out of the woods because Russia no longer, is the big dog out there. The little independent group with a weapon, you bet.
Michael Fjetland, Better Times Ahead, April Fool, bought off of Amazon, and Better Times Ahead, aprilfool.com. What, in your opinion, is going to be the next 9/11, and how soon is it?
George, that's a fascinating question. I was talking about that potential for, nearly a decade before it actually happened. The technology seems to accelerate. We're getting to the point where between people being able to smuggle, it doesn't take much, as you know, to smuggle anybody into this country, whether you're coming from the south or the north. That's a tough question, but I think, yes, it could happen again, could happen within the next decade.
Scary stuff. Talk about the Middle East now. We've got a new regime now in Egypt. We have Syrian problems. We have Libyan problems. There, like I said, it goes around and it comes around. It seems to repeat itself every 15, 20 years, every generation. How important is that? Very important.
What happened, one of the reasons why I was against the Iraq War is I knew Saddam was not part of the 9/11 thing. No, that was about the time my tenure on the local Fox channel came to an end, when I started talking about, Iraq was not going to be a cakewalk. I don't know what, people were so blind back then. They just really wanted to believe whatever George and Dick Cheney were trying to tell them, that, the fear thing. And what it did is it opened up that civil war between Sunnis and Shiite Muslims. Killings have really not been Muslims as Christians, like people think. It's Muslim on Muslim. I hate you because you're from, it's the old days here where the Baptists and the Methodists, the Catholics all kind of said, those other guys are not going to go to heaven. You know what I mean? But those are pretty tame compared to what's going on between the Shiites and the Sunnis. And so that opened that Pandora's box. Syria is a spillover from that. A lot of Saddam hated al-Qaeda. He hated Osama bin Laden. I mean, Saddam was the anti-religious nut. Osama bin Laden was the religious nut. And so Saddam would not let al-Qaeda into Iraq. So when we invaded Iraq, that really opened the doors for them to come pouring in. And that's when all the shit hit the fan, shall we say. And we got Fallujah, we got all these other stuff. That became the training ground, for, continuing to attack the new Iraqi government, and then spilling over into Syria. And so it's really kind of been an uncontrolled firestorm that is enveloping the Middle East. Now you have Egypt. We got rid of Mubarak after 3 decades. I was there when Jimmy Carter was negotiating the first peace treaty between Israel and Egypt. I got kicked out of Mount Hilton because it turned out they had to make room for the entourage from the president to come in and take over the hotel for those negotiations. I wrote about this in the book. But now the General Sisi wants to be pretty much like another Mubarak. We're back to dictators. We're back to the same old crap. So in some ways, the players have changed, but it's the same crap. We've not really moved into a democratic future. It's been really screwed up between what Bush did with Iraq. Unfortunately, we could have done some things early on in Syria that might have headed it off. They did not. Now that's just an intractable mess that doesn't really have any kind of resolution palatable to almost anybody. I mean, here you have the idea of, do you keep the Assad murderer guy in, or do you let, now the al-Qaeda kind of took over from the opposition that were secular, who would have been a good change, and now so you don't have any good choices over there. So it still remains one of the most screwed up parts of the world, being competed for by Venezuela's dysfunction now that Chavez is dead, and some of these other countries like the Crimea and Ukraine, because of the situation there, and with the Palestinians and the Israelis not getting any closer to an agreement. It's just another mess that seems to be ongoing. We'd like to get away from it, but you can't. And then you keep creating more of these jihadis who sooner or later decide we're the problem instead of, each other. I don't see a good outcome anytime soon on that, George. I hate to say that. I like to be an optimist, but it's because we have people in office who really haven't understood these international dynamics. You may be surprised to hear this, but the first George H.W. Bush, the international guy, really had a good feeling of what you could do in the world and what you could not. That's why that when in 91 the Gulf War, they chose not to invade Iraq. Of what to do with post-war Iraq, is that gross negligence or stupid? And so that's the type of stuff we've gotten into. And then once that starts unfurling, it just makes everything else that much worse. So,
well, I understand what you're saying. With George H.W. Bush, James Baker said one time, he said, what did you want us to do? You want us to go over there and you want us to take out Saddam. Who would you put in his place?
Exactly.
And how can you guarantee that it would be any better than what we had?
It's just as bad. And see, because the British put these are all countries that were put together at the end of World War I by the British mainly, some of the French and all those guys. And these are artificial borders, and they were intentionally designed to be unstable. In other words, you had to have a strong man or the whole thing would blow apart. And the British, it was the old divide and conquer concept. You're aware of that, right? The Brits knew that if they could keep each side against each other, they would have a way of leveraging everybody, and then they'd have their strong man, and that would be their guy. And that ended up being Saddam. You got the same problem in all of these other countries that are inherently unstable for that reason. And then when Maliki, the new Iraqi guy, comes in, it's all about his people. He didn't give a crap about the Shiite side versus the Sunni side. And so you end up with, it's my clan versus your clan kind of mentality. And that's what we've ended up with. It is going to probably remain fairly explosive. Everybody, and there seems to be a global trend of more extremism by all groups. I mean, you see this even Jewish groups, the ultra-Orthodox that are yelling at women, Israeli women, from walking on the wrong side of the street or getting on the wrong side part of the bus, just like the Muslim extremists. They all tend to treat women like dirt. If you notice that the more religious extreme they get, women are always the ones who get the brunt of it. And so, and this ultra-nationalistic thing, kind of like precursor to World War II, where each country, like, Germany's hyper-German, everybody else is doing their thing, and rather than really kind of being multinational and inclusive, et cetera, we seem to be kind of going back to that ultra-nationalistic thing. You see a rise of the right groups now in Europe. Oh, my God, you're letting in the immigrants are coming in from Africa and, the other poor parts. That's their Mexico. And, again, same deal, because they're looking for jobs, looking for a better life. They're looking for a more stable government than the place where they are, where you're getting hacked to death if you're in the middle of an Africa village because you're from the wrong clan. That is going to be so we're going to see now more of this right-wing stuff, Europe, et cetera, even here, and that's not going to lend to anything good coming down the pike soon.
It's Africa. That's going to be the next hot spot. If we hear about it in the news, sometimes, we have hot spots and we never hear about it because they take care of business before it ever becomes public. But, they're saying that Africa is going to be the next hot spot. In fact, it already has been a few hot spots and a few flare-ups over there.
Yeah,
can you
that's
speak
true.
to that
and you know why? Americans think, oh, Africa, it's poor, it's awful, it's the dark continent, right? I've been to Africa and South Africa and North Africa, Egypt, Nigeria, and South Africa. Africa is the mother lode of mineral wealth. The Chinese have had they have a long-term mission. We can't even think beyond 3 days or in Congress, 3 months out. Very short-term thinking. Long-term always wins. The Chinese saw that they have cornered all the rare earth minerals that are basically deposited in Africa. And so they'll build a road or a railroad or give them something in order to have access to that. In 2000, when George W. Bush took over the presidency, we actually had a huge rare earth mineral stockpile. What do you do with rare earth minerals? You build titanium missile parts and high-tech aircraft parts and all of those types of things that you've got to have those minerals for. And so that, and then on the kind of the northern third of Africa is that line between the Islamic part from the Middle East and the Christian South. So then you have the extremists from the Islamic part filtering down into Nigeria, which is where most of that, where you read about the villagers being attacked. Yeah, they're right. Africa will be probably the newest hotspot for a couple of reasons. The competition for the minerals on one side and that clash between the extremists in the Islamic world and the Christian world on the other side.
Wow. That's really, how does Israel play in all of this, in the global scheme of things?
That's a good question. They've got, one thing about Israel, because they don't have mineral wealth, they've really focused on their intellectual wealth, and they got technology to get water out of nothing like, we're going to need, because we've got droughts and all that kind of stuff. But yet at the same token, they haven't really, they're faced with the prospect that either they have to come up with a two-state solution with the Palestinians, or they become like South Africa was in the old days, apartheid. And that means that you've got a majority of Palestinians in the state of Israel with no voting right, just like old South Africa, where you had a majority with the blacks, but everything was controlled by the minority white government, and that eventually flipped with Mandela, and that's about the time I went to South Africa. But the problem has always been the leadership that would be willing to do deals in the past, and then you have Palestinians that wouldn't do deals, like Arafat turned one down. I mean, there's been a comedy of errors on that side.
I can't get